2022 Program of Studies. I think this is my 5th year presenting this document. For those of you who have seen this presentation before, some of it will be a repeat, but I'm going to be happy to share with you some updates and some changes, but we'll review the document as well. Not that I want you to do so now, but embedded in this presentation on the school year is the actual in draft form program of studies available at your review. For this presentation purpose, I would say let's stay on the PowerPoint slide, but you're welcome to go back to that at any point. Next slide, please. Thank you, Brooke. So the program of studies is essentially broken into 2 parts. The first portion of the program of studies is where you'll find our process and procedure for handling course selection. We have dates and the time frame listed. There is information pertaining to the curriculum and options. We have special programs listed in the program as well, such as dual enrollment or acceleration. And we have our grading scale and our graduation requirements also posted. Those are school board policies, but we have them embedded in the program of studies because that's important information to know as students progress throughout their 4 years of high school. The second portion of the document are departmental pages. And here you'll find visual descriptions, a scope and sequence of what a 9th grade student can take beginning in 9th grade and then progressing throughout their 4 years. As well as individual course descriptions for each and every course that we have available at Upper Dublin High School. Next slide, please. What's important to know as we talk about the program of studies and course selection are some deadlines in the process as it pertains to our student information system. Beginning soon on the 22nd, the teacher window will open where teachers will meet with students one-on-one to review course recommendations for next year. This will be a conversation with students where teachers will have an opportunity to review progress and how the school year has been going thus far and talk about opportunities and courses that could be an option for the student looking ahead for the next year. Those recommendations that teachers make in that conversation will be inputted in Infinite Campus for eventually a parent to review. Now, during this window, during the January 22nd to February 3rd window, it's closed for parents to view, but once it closes, parents will have the opportunity to then see what those recommendations are in all core content area classes. On the 5th through the 9th, the window then opens, and that's where students and parents will see big picture and they'll see all of the classes that they have been recommended for, and they can then choose what their elective classes will be for the following school year. Also in Infinite Campus on March 16th, that's when the window opens for parent verification, and this gives the parent an opportunity to indicate that they have seen the courses, that they are in approval of the courses, and that they agree with the course selections that were made for their child. Now, from now until the 16th, there's many conversations that happen. So as I say these dates, please keep in mind that conversations are fluid and teachers are communicating with students and parents can have conversations with teachers about what those recommendations are and what those elective classes look like. We also have quite a few presentations available for students to hear about what those electives are in classroom setting, in small group setting, and in large group settings as well. And then on June 6th, this is a standing date. We always have, this is our course selection deadline. In Infinite Campus, course requests will close, and those classes for next year will be locked in place.
Ms. Ward, if I can jump in here on this slide. One of the things that we're really excited about with the teacher recommendations, starting with our 8th grade teachers and moving through, will be particular at the 8th grade level. Our curriculum supervisors have worked with the 8th grade teachers and 9th grade teachers to develop a self-reflection tool. So the students will actually in their classes do some self-reflection, both about content, but also the learning behaviors that they possess. So how they participate in dialogues, in group presentations and group work and independent work, all of those factors leading up to that one-on-one conversation with their teachers. So that reflective process is going to be something new that we use this year. And the recommendation that the teachers put in the computer will be what the student is requesting for next year. And if there's a disagreement between the teacher and the student based on the teacher's professional judgment, the teacher will reach out to parents to have that conversation with parents to let them know of the concerns there. But we're really excited that we're changing the idea of course placement to course requests and student requests. So students will have a lot of ownership going into that decision.
Thank you. And as we look ahead to next year, this process is still the same, but I thought it was important to mention that throughout the 21-22 school year, we still have the window available for students to make some changes in their core classes based on critical changes. And that may be a recommendation from a teacher, that may come from a student, a counselor, administrator, but that's the opportunity. There's a window of time during the first marking period of next year where students can make adjustments to schedule based on feedback and conversation with teachers. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, in the second portion of the document of the program, here we have departmental information, and supervisors have an opportunity to give descriptions as to important information about their content area, as well as provide this example of a visual progression of how students move throughout their 4 years of high school. So this gives a snapshot of what a student could take in 9th through 12th grade in English. Again, all content areas have this visual progression so that parents have a sense as to what years coming look like. And in each section, there are specific course descriptions, prerequisites, credit value, how many days a week, very specific information pertaining to each and every course available at the high school.
And one of the things that we worked on last year with teachers and curriculum supervisors and the school counselors was really starting to look at those prerequisites that are in our course descriptions. And I would say 99.9% of those course prerequisites are sequential. So it's no longer you have to be in a certain level of honors or earn a certain grade in a certain class to get to that next class. That again comes back to that student choice angle side. So the prerequisites in most cases are, in order to get into world literature, for example, you would have completed American literature. So in that sequential order.
Next slide, please. Okay, so it's important to talk about some revisions that we've made to the program of studies and courses that will no longer be offered in the program. You'll see under eliminated courses, we have 3 classes that we are recommending that we eliminate from the program of studies. Those 3 classes historically have not run at the high school due to either no students signing up for the classes or very, very small amount of students signing up. And as you look at the first course example, the computer webs application class, we have a bit more advanced courses in computers that students can sign up for if they're interested in that program or a computer programming that students have selected to choose. And therefore, that class has become non-essential. Accounting 2, we do have an Accounting 2 honors course available for students to select, and the majority of students that take honors, the majority of students that take Accounting 1 do move to Accounting 2 and then choose the honors course that is available. And the final course, Intro to Printmaking and Graphic Arts, we have multiple allied arts classes that students can select that have pieces of those courses embedded in them and provide more choice and opportunity for our students. The second portion of the eliminated courses are level 3 classes that we have that we are removing due to restructuring. All of those classes, as you can see, are level 3 classes and are no longer needed. Next slide, please. Just a little bit more information about deadlines, but it would be helpful to communicate. Students will start to receive information about course selection on the 25th. That's both for Sandy Run Middle School and the high school. So 8th graders will receive their their virtual packet of information and a presentation at the same time that 9th through 11th graders receive their information. On the 28th, we have our virtual evening event for parents in grades with children in grades 8 through 11 who are encouraged and welcome to attend this event, where we showcase the different courses that we have available and give parents an opportunity to ask some questions about course selection and the process and classes. As always, school counselors will be meeting with students throughout that window of time from February 16th through March 5th, where we will pull students in either Zoom or Google Meet to review individually with them one-on-one what their big picture of course selection looks like. And on the 12th, we have our override change form due date that we are still asking for parents to complete and return by that date. And then again, the final deadline. The final date is the June 1st final course selection change date. And all of that information we push out through Mr. Schultz and Mr. Ortiz's weekly messages, Counselor Schoology pages. I know there's a lot of emails going on right now, but that's one of the primary platforms that we use to make sure parents and students are aware that these deadlines and that these dates are important to know, and they're aware of their process. And the last slide that I have for you is just a reminder, the program of studies. This is last year's image. Our students are still in creation mode of creating our cover for this year. So I'm sorry to say that I don't yet have that available for you, but coming soon will be our student created cover page. On the screen here, you see this year's cover and an arrow pointed to where parents and students can find the program of studies. Also with some more detailed information on the picture, the image on the right, we have our student created course selection video, which is available right now for parents and students to view. However, we haven't encouraged people to look at that just yet, but you're certainly welcome to, and additional information available on the guidance website as it pertains to course selection and the program of studies. That concludes my presentation for this evening. Happy to take any questions.
Mrs. Ward, before we turn it over to questions, I would just like to emphasize a few points. First of all, Mrs. Ward, thank you so much for the presentation and walking us through. And Mr. Hoffman, thank you for speaking about how we're really putting kids in more of the driver's seat for their own learning. One of the things that I want folks that might be listening tonight or might be listening at another time to remember is the course override process is not a repackaged AEA, the Against Educational Advice form. That process is totally gone. The course override process is just really a process to document the fact that that there's some disagreement with a course recommendation, but it's just that it doesn't harm kids anyway. It doesn't prevent them from getting extra assistance or help. So we just want to make that clear. And the other thing I want to, preemptively thank the high school guidance department, because this work of and the middle school, but more so at the high school because of the complexity of student scheduling, this work takes an inordinate amount of time in a normal year. And with some kids being in school and some kids being virtual, the process may wind up taking a little bit longer this year. So I'm sure if any of those timelines need to be extended, Mrs. Ward will let us know. But I just want to thank our counseling staff in advance for all the work that you're going to do. So thank you so much, Mrs. Ward.
Ms. Francis?
Sure, thank you. First of all, this is always a an important presentation for us, so thank you again. One thing that, as I'm now a high school parent, which is new, I'm learning about some of the ins and outs, and I'm very appreciative of the notion that the students will have some say and a real actual conversation about course selection, because there's a lot to consider, more things than even you realize when you're coming in as an 8th grade parent. I guess my question is really for, and maybe for Ms. Perez or Dr. Perez, apologies, as well, for those students with 504 plans, with IEPs, with GIEPs, whose needs may fall a little bit outside of what is typical or may need some guidance in terms of how to have those conversations and self-advocate. Or is there a concept of like a construct of how they're going to have those conversations? Is that something we can get to parents in advance so that we can support those kids in advance of these conversations?
Sure, I'll jump in. Absolutely, yes. The survey tool itself will just be kind of, as I mentioned, habits of mind for kids in most cases, where they'll think about their role in a certain class. You know, I'll use English as an example, being that English guy. You know, that I like to read a variety of types of books. I like to revise the work that I write, you know, versus the idea of I don't like to write papers at all, or I don't like to ever look at something I've written a second time. Some of those habits of mine need to be part of what we walk into, knowing that our teacher is going to teach us the content that we need when we're in the room, but what we bring with ourselves as learners into that room is what we want students to talk through. We often have 8th grade science teachers, for example, saying, you know, they struggle with a 9th grade recommendation because they don't teach, you know, the 9th grade curriculum is just a piece of the topic, a piece of their course. You know, a biology teacher making a chemistry recommendation really doesn't have anything to do with biology at that point. It has a lot to do with science thinker in that piece. So I think, Ms. Francic, we can work with parents. Dr. Perez can work with case managers once the reflective surveys are created, that we can use those to, you know, preview with students. We can get them access to those surveys so that they can review as well, to kind of lean in for those. I don't know, Dr. Perez, you haven't seen these yet. These are kind of hot off the press that we're just looking at, but I'm not sure if you have any others. Or Ms. Penner, I know you saw.
No, thanks, Mr. Huffman. No, I think it's really important that we have that opportunity to give students voice, and part of that voice is learning about their habits of mind. So I'm anxious to take a look at those surveys, because they will also be really helpful in the development of goals and SDIs as well, yes, because we get to know from the students, you know, where their strengths are. So that'll be a really valuable tool for more than one reason.
You know, student metacognition is so important. And one of the things, you know, especially adolescent learners, sometimes they possess skills that they don't even know and can't even necessarily recognize. So when we talk about habits of mind and we talk about metacognition, this is really a great opportunity for kids to sort of have the mirror put in front of themselves so that they can start to see the gifts that they bring to this conversation. I'll use myself as an example. Believe it or not, I was a little bit of a shy student. I wasn't really confident in my math abilities. But when I actually had a math teacher sit down with me in high school and explain to me what she was seeing in my math ability, it gave me the confidence to stretch myself, right? And I think having these conversations is going to open the eyes of so many of our kids for them to realize what we see in them. And that, I think, is going to really be a boost to their academic self-esteem.
So, Dr. Yanni, as we've talked with supervisors, it's a piece of that, you know, that we want to provide an opportunity for all students to stretch a little bit. But the benefit of some of those conversations is we can also talk to students about, you know, do you have a part-time job? Are you going to be involved with athletics? Are you going to be in the band? Or you know, a lot of those other pieces, so that we can see where healthy stretches and where we may need to create some healthy boundaries as well to create that balance.
I really
think-
appreciate, I'm sorry, go ahead,
No,
Mrs. Ward.
I was just going to reiterate, I appreciate what Dr. Yanni said about the time that counselors spend working with students. That's where that big picture conversation comes in, just like Mr. Hoffman was saying about, kind of managing or balancing what the student is able to do with everything else going on in their life. And I will just say that counselors work very closely with case managers to ensure that we are providing the right amount of supports for students. And again, kind of balancing classwork, schoolwork, class selection and choice with what's manageable for them and for all students. So this really is a process that goes on for the second semester of the year. I showed a lot of dates with time frame and deadlines, but this really is takes a lot of time for the second semester of the school year.
Yeah, no, I know it's such a huge undertaking, and I do so appreciate that. I think something that Dr. Yanni said that really resonated with me is that it's really coming at it from a way of sort of a strengths-based mindset. And that's something I think a lot of kids are struggling right now with, not all, but some, with all the turmoil and tumult of this year. So I appreciate that opportunity too, to help them see perhaps what they don't see in themselves. So thank you.
Okay, Art, you have a question?
Quick question. Ms. Ward, you said the guidance counselors will be meeting with the students over Zoom. For the students who are in the building, are there face-to-face meetings also with guidance counselors?
So we're actually in the planning process of that right now. Very likely they'll be all Zoom or Google Meet appointments with students. We were trying to troubleshoot and figure out location and pulling students out who were in person. And I think the conclusion that we came to is that we're probably just going to hold all virtual meetings for all students, whether you're in the building or at home. Good question.
Okay. Anyone else have a question from the committee or the board? I just want to add on to what everyone else said. I think it's great that the students are having the opportunity to reflect and think about where they want to be. And I hope that carries over into them thinking about how they got where they are, like the homework and the test taking and what they're doing in class and bringing that all together. And are they doing all they can? So I think that's terrific. And Donna, thank you so much for doing this presentation again.
Ms. Ionetti, one last point. If I may, I just wanted to again thank the administration, Mr. Schultz, Ms. Ward, and the leadership team. Some of us who've been on the board for a number of years remembers what the program of study used to look like, and we've come a long way, and I think it's a very user-friendly document right now. And I just wanted to thank everyone who was involved in putting it together.
Anyone else? Okay, so I think community input is next. Am I
Actually,
correct?
Mrs. Ionetti, before we do that, so we talked, a lot tonight about the high school program of studies. Can we just basically maybe just spend a few minutes and talk about how course selection plays out at Sandy Run? And I'm happy to do that, or Mrs. Ward, if Mr. Ortiz is on here. I think we should probably, because there really is alignment in that process. So I think it probably would behoove us a little bit to speak about that, if that's okay.
Steve, you're welcome to take that one. You might be the best one to answer your own question. Right? I think you said you were okay taking it.
Sure. And I also see Mr. Ortiz raised his hand. So
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I just saw.
I will allow him. I will.
Sure. Thank you. So, one of the things, if you think back to just a few years ago, we offered multiple levels of mathematics. when kids left 5th grade into 6th grade. So we had 601, 602, and we also had pre-algebra. And we were using as a district a number of data points, some really good, strong data points, some data points that maybe it's really when we analyzed them, there were better things to look at. Just as we're doing around habits of mind and talking about kids about their metacognition as they get older, it's really important that we have those metacognition conversations for kids at the middle school as well. One of the things when you think about education, not just in Upper Dublin, but everywhere, little kids, elementary kids, and as a former elementary teacher, I remember this, kids typically think they're great at everything or not so great at everything. And so it's really important for us to foster in kids a really good understanding of where their strengths are and what they can do to make their areas that maybe aren't as strong, even stronger than what they can be. And before I let Mr. Ortiz speak, one of the things as a district we need to continue to look at is students' performance in courses. What is, Mrs. Ionity alluded to this, what is it that's creating either great performance or not so great performance? Of course we need to look at assessments, but are kids not doing well in courses because they're not doing homework or they're not participating? So we really need to help kids understand the totality of their educational experience. And with that, I will let Mr. Ortiz, I know he's chomping at the bit, I could tell.
Thanks, Dr. Yanni. And no, I mean, between your comments and what was already explained from the high school level, much of what we do at Sandy Run echoes what you just heard from Mrs. Ward. But actually this afternoon, we just finished up a meeting with a lot of our teachers talking about the course recommendation process. And they're really excited about those individual conversations just to assess those habits of mind that Mr. Hoffman mentioned. I apologize for the dog. And, some of our objective measures that we've used in the past, we don't have access to this year, which I think is really a blessing in disguise, just to turn that conversation back over to students and allow them to advocate for themselves. So we're excited about our teachers are, speaking as teams and as departments, and we're hoping for some really good conversations between students, teachers, and the families.
Okay, does anyone else? Steve, you're muted.
I was just saying thank you to everyone. Sorry about that.
Is there anyone else who would like to add anything to this conversation? Okay, so I think then we are ready to move on to community input. So if Brooke, you want to take that over there?
Happy to take that away. Hold on just a moment. Okay. So would the community raise your hand if you would like to make a comment? And I should note that we did not receive any comments prior to this meeting. So if the community could raise their hand. Julia Watt, go ahead and please state where you're from in the district.
Hi there. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Julia Watt, Fort Washington. I have a first grader at Fort Washington and a 6th and 8th grader. Thank you to all of you and the teachers for working so hard this year amidst all these challenges. 9 months have now passed since our schools have shut down, and we have learned much since those first few weeks. And while days are hopeful ahead with vaccines, we are years from being void of this awful virus. We do know that we can be safe with safety measures in place. Transmission in schools are rare, and doctors and scientific communities have stated that schools are safe and safer than most places for kids. So I'm here tonight to ask the board why you are denying our secondary education students a free and appropriate public education. My secondary students have not been getting an appropriate education, and our elementary students missed out on 2.5 months of appropriate education when you all decided to vote against the recommendation of Dr. Yanni and not put students in the building safely 5 days a week. If you had voted to allow that in September, we could have appropriately planned for staffing and budget needs, just like our neighboring districts, such as Wissahickon and Souderton. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe 6 of you that sit on our board no longer have children 1st through 12th grade learning from your homes. I'd like to portray a picture of my current 8th grade's school day. Starts his day with a routine, getting dressed, eating a good breakfast, and first few minutes feeling good about the day ahead. It quickly leaves as he sees all empty boxes on his screen with the exception of his teacher. This is an 80-minute block of learning, 1 hour and 20 minutes. No faces to interact with, some small breakout rooms where most kids don't talk. And after 20 minutes of trying to complete his assignment in silence, with the exception of kids asking the teacher questions, he's unmotivated, bored, and his teenage brain tells him to look at other easily accessible websites that can pass the time. It goes on and on. Only a few times a day does he actually speak to his classmates and teachers. Kids are curled up on sofas in bedrooms, playing on Xboxes, on social media. Secondary hybrid model is not working. Our son has begged to not attend school as he sits in a class for 80 minutes with his teacher and 2 other students while on his Chromebook the entire time. This is not a free and appropriate public education. My 1st grader also checks out at about 30 minutes into his day. For the past 3 days of virtual learning, he's refused to pick up a pencil and write. Instead, he voices into his Chromebook searches such as pug wearing a Santa hat, and then continues on this for about an hour. I'm not so concerned about what they're not learning, but what are they learning? You can be in school and go shopping on Amazon. You can be in school and play PBS Kids video games for an hour. And that when you're bored or things are hard, well, you can get instant comfort and gratification on other fun-filled websites. The survey you sent out should have had further questionings, and especially for the social aspect. My children have not suffered socially because we have been actively arranging safe ways for them to engage with friends and continue those friendships. And this doesn't even scratch the surface of virtual learning. All the kids with IEPs, life skills, learning support, kids who don't have safe environments at home. I'm thankful for our teachers in Upper Dublin. Most are going above and beyond. My 6th grade daughter, who's highly motivated, has amazing teachers who are making learning as much fun as they can across the screen, and with great creative paper and pencil activities. And lastly, I know many of you, some of you on a personal level, I do believe we all want what is best for these kids, but I challenge you to look deeply within your moral decisions that lie ahead. You are our elected officials, and in turn, you're the voice of the people in Upper Dublin. Allow the kids who are hybrid to be 5 days if they want. There are barely any kids in there. And I'll end with this. Last spring, many said, we won't be swimming at our fort this summer. No way, that's not going to happen safely. Well, what a summer we had with people planning properly and kids and adults being able to be outside in a safe and healthy and happy environment. So my question to you is, why and what is limiting you from making a board action and decision to send out?
Thank you for your comments. Anyone else have comments? Mr. Barenbaum, go ahead. Thank you. Mr. Barenbaum?
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. I like to respectfully hand the mic back to Julia Watt so she can finish her question. I think you guys have more integrity and respect to cut her off mid-question. You want to please pass it back to Julia so she can finish your question and have the board answer it?
Ms. Ionity, I think it's your call on how we proceed as acting chair this evening. Given Mr. Barenbaum, that we do have a 4-minute rule. We may have perhaps stated that a bit more clearly in advance, but I don't believe Ms. Evans meant to be rude. That's just the timer that we have. That being said, I think if you have the floor, Ms. Nyanity, I would recommend that Mr. Barenbaum ask any question that he would have.
Mr. Barenbaum, do you want to use any more of your time?
Are you going to give Julia back the floor so she can finish her question?
If I may, board policy 006 or local board procedure 006 explicitly says a 4-minute time period will be allowed.
You guys are disgusting. You're absolutely disgusting, and you should be ashamed of yourselves. I will ask a question. Ms. Ionetti, you posted on Twitter this week that you think it's good that we got a rating to take out more debt. What's your view of the financial position of Upper Dublin School District?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're not doing a back and forth with the community.
Questions should not be directed to board
Yeah.
members.
It's
Questions
not
directed to the board or the administration.
Brooke, is his time up?
Mr. Barenbaum, would you like to, I'm going to continue to Ms. Vitella, if you don't mind. And
Yeah, please do.
thank you. Hi, Ms. Vitella. Thank you so much for your comments. Go ahead.
Hi, Jenny Vitella, Ambler. I just want to follow up with what Julie is saying. There's been a lot of conversation among parents, and I want you to know that Julie's situation, she is not alone. There are many, many parents and many, many children that are really suffering. I know in my own household, and everyone's dealing with it differently. And it is, when you're talking teenagers, it's actually scary because you're not sure if the lack of motivation to do work or not turning in assignments or an A+ student is now getting Ds. There's something wrong. This is I don't know how else to really say it, except for you have to listen to these parents. We are begging. We've been begging for these kids to get back into school. We know we can do it safely. My kids are begging to get back to school. They are desiring, and that survey, I agree with Julia. The question about friendship. So of course my kids still have their friends because we find safe places to go and to do things with them outside or whatever with friends. And not to mention, thank God we fought and won for sports because that has been an absolute godsend for their brains, their bodies, and their social interaction. But what we're doing to these kids is not healthy. It is horrible to them. And it is difficult to watch on a daily basis. And I'm actually home. I don't have to be somewhere. I don't have to be at a job. I didn't have to quit a job. There are a lot of people suffering out there. And I think that just going along like, oh, virtual's fine and everything's fine. It just isn't fine. And we're begging this to getting this week off and not even taking this week to go all virtual and not even a peep during the legislative meeting the night before was also a complete slap in the face to all these parents that also believed the thing that you signed and agreed to, which was that attestation that had rules and regs in terms of people in and out of the buildings and who had cases and when the buildings would close and all those things we went through and approved. And then we have a legislative meeting a month later and the next day schools are closed. It is unfair to these children, and there are families really suffering that are dealing with childcare issues. I won't even get into the fact about the asynchronous learning that's happening in some classes 100%. Not just one day when a teacher can't be there because they have childcare issues. I'm talking 100% is the asynchronous class. I'm talking about tests given to kids on days they're in school and some kids aren't in school that day, and how all the tests ought to be on Wednesdays This should be something that should be district-wide because it is unfair. Even if it's open book, I can tell you that it isn't the same because the kids are at home are Googling, on the internet. They're looking on their phone. They're calling a friend. They're asking a parent. I know that. And the kids that are going into school feel that any sort of open book is kind of cheating. They're not used to that. In addition, I will also, from a science standpoint, labs should be able to be done if the person is in school, not just on days they're not in school. So please, we have been begging. It is time to open these schools up, get these children the education they deserve. They're dying here at home. They really are. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Patella. Anyone else? Please raise your hand virtually. Ms. Burns, go ahead.
Hi, it's Lisa Burns from Fort Washington. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry. In regards to the Touch Base Tuesday that spoke about the vaccine being available to staff, which is one of the markers that has to be considered for a 5-day all-in for middle school and high school, talked about the vaccine being available to the staff, which I understand. But what will happen if a staff member chooses not to take the vaccine and then becomes sick or unable to come to school or quarantine or whatever that forces that staff member to be out of school, which then forces a sub to take over, another teacher to take over, what have you. How will that be what will happen with that in the future? And if you're not able to answer this question here on this Zoom call, because apparently we're not going back and forth, which I understand, but I have 2 minutes and 48 seconds, so I'll use every second of it. Then how do we get these questions answered, like the one I just asked? And how do we get all the other questions answered that parents have? How do we communicate to the board? A one-sided Zoom call is very challenging for all of us. So if we email, who do we email? What do we do if our question doesn't get answered? What if we still have another question on top of that? Because as we all know, everything is changing every second. New things pop up. So if you can't answer that question as far as the vaccine and the teachers involved, how do we get that question answered? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Ms. Stein, go ahead.
Hi, this is Erin Stein from Fort Washington. I wanted to start tonight to go back to the beginning of the meeting, hearing about the studies that will be offered, and it brought me back to I have a student who graduated from the high school, and I also have a student in the high school currently, and I do agree that the depth of classes offered are wonderful, and it was really nice to hear all of the classes that will be offered and how the selections will be made, and how the teachers will now, even hearing Dr. Yanni's reflections on how teachers saw things in him that encouraged him in certain areas. I definitely experienced that as well when I was in high school. And I can't help but feel like you're talking about somebody else's students, because it makes me sad. As happy as it makes me to hear all of these programs being offered, it makes me sad to think that I really wonder how well my students' teachers know them at this point. And will these types of things, and they absolutely will be, and they absolutely are being missed through virtual school. And at an education meeting, I just feel like I can't help but feel like everybody is just glazing over what is happening currently. And I know we have to plan for the future, but I feel like you're talking about other people's kids and not even the students that are here, because it's almost like, well, just forget about 2020. We got to move on. And you still have all these kids out here that are suffering. I mean, people are not being dramatic, and this is not about a childcare issue or an inconvenience or a work thing. I mean, these kids virtual is not working for so many kids. And all of the things you talk about tonight, with these teachers being able to see the great things in these kids, that's all getting lost this year. And I'm really worried about next year at this point. I mean, my child's going to be a senior, and I don't even know if he's going to be in school in his senior year. That is how the community feels right now, because we're not getting the answers and the reassurance that this problem will be fixed. And this is just one of so many problems that has been caused by virtual school. And I hope that the board is listening when parents are talking. Like I said, it's not to be dramatic. It is the truth. And I really want you to realize, when we say we're hybrid, my students have gone to school 8 days this entire year. They haven't missed one of the days that was offered to them. They have gone to school for 8 days. They have seen their teachers' faces for 8 days. How would a teacher know my son's potential in anything from seeing him for 8 days? Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Ms. Weisner, please go ahead.
This is actually Margaret Shimko.
Margaret Shimko, can you spell please and tell me where you're from?
SHIMKO from Drescher. I would just like to reiterate that, through my many letters and correspondence with the board and Dr. Yanni, that again, everything has remained the same. There is no communication about proceeding further or planning for in-person schooling 5 days a week, as there should be. By this point, we are now almost a year for when our kids have been out of school. Almost a year. Because it was March, now we're January. A year. Think about that our kids have had so little normalcy in their lives. And if you even just look at what's going on today on the news, there's so much going on for these kids in the world. And the only safe spot for so many of them is to be in school and have a routine. I'm not saying that the teachers aren't trying. There are some wonderful teachers that I have reached out to, that both of my children have, that are doing a fabulous job, but it's not the same. And you can't even begin to comprehend. If you see these kids, I have a 13 and a 14-year-old right now. If you see their faces, the way they've acted, even in particularly this little extra break we got here, because now it's been just that much longer since they've been in school, your heart would break, because they are not the children that I had back in February of last year. And again, for this, until there is clear communication with all the parents of this district who are paying taxes to this school district, I want clear communication about getting my children back into school and what that will take. And we are owed that. We are owed that. It has been a year. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. If you wish to comment further, please raise your hand. If not, we'll close community input.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Community input is done. Does anyone want to respond? Dr. Yanni?
Sure. Thank you, Mrs. Einedy. Let me start with the question about the vaccine, and let me give just a little bit of context. And this context will be communicated in a Touch Base Tuesday and some other documents that we're preparing to capture some of the most frequently asked questions that we're getting. So the vaccine has been approved under an emergency mandate. So employers cannot require anyone to get the vaccine. The vaccine in our talks with the Montgomery County Office of Public Health, we are hopeful that the vaccine will be available to our school staff starting the third week in January. And so when I say our school staff, all schools in Montgomery County. All means all, which means all of our staff members will have access to the vaccine. So not just our teachers, but our teachers, our custodians, our bus drivers, our administrators, our educational assistants, everyone. If a teacher does not get a vaccine and gets sick, we will do what we have been doing with our teachers, where we work with them on a case-by-case basis on making accommodations. And those accommodations could range from everything where, yes, we might have to hire a sub. We might put some supervision in a class and have that teacher remote into that classroom, but that's really on a case-by-case basis. Regarding the hybrid model, it's interesting, some of the feedback that the most recent Touch Base Tuesday and the one before has garnered. One of the things that is undeniable is that we saw a precipitous decline in attendance between Thanksgiving and the winter break in our hybrid model. And many folks have said, if more and more families are going to choose to keep their kids virtual, simply combine the hybrid groups and allow the students to come in for 5 days. Part of the reason that we asked in the survey the question about my kids in hybrid and I want to stay in hybrid, or my kids in hybrid and wants to go to virtual, or, was to see how many of our students may want to make, or their families may want to make, instructional model changes. We also asked the question about who would support or who would like a 5-day model. We're going to put all of that data in an easy to read charts in the Touch Base Tuesday next week, because we asked the question. So we'll give you all that data back. Administration will then be making some recommendations to the board. So the board is governance. The board sets policy. They evaluate the superintendent. They set the budget. It's the administration's job to make recommendations to the board, and then the board will then, consider the recommendations that we make. The surveys are open until Friday at 4 o'clock. And so we have been monitoring the surveys, and we'll continue to monitor the surveys, and we'll have all that data ready to go. And it will be sent out next week. The information in the return to normal operations plan, when we talk about our current instructional models and we talk about our ideal instructional models, as your superintendent, I believe that we will always have some sort of virtual option for families that want that for their children. We also know that we have families on a continuum. We have some families that absolutely want 5 days a week. We have some families that want their children to be in a virtual program. And so we will work to be able to satisfy everyone on that continuum. The considerations that are in that resuming normal operations plan, the vaccine, some changes to the Montgomery County stance on quarantine and distancing, none of those are requirements, they're considerations. And, I'll say that we have been compared to other districts, and it's interesting because some folks want us to compare and other folks don't want us to compare. And we've been compared a lot to Souderton. And when you look at the number of kids in Souderton that have had to be excluded because they were the close contact of a positive case, they've had several hundred students. At our high school, we've had fewer than 30. And when kids in Souderton are excluded from school, they get completely asynchronous work. That's not the reality in Upper Dublin. And I'm not passing any judgment on Souderton. That's not my place, but I'm just giving you a little bit of the comparison. I would urge parents again that if you have concerns about a way a class is being run, if it's 100% asynchronous, or you're not getting or your child is not getting what you believe they need to get, please work with the teacher, work with the principal, work with the curriculum supervisor. We've laid out some steps of communication, and we'll continue to publish that to remind everyone what those steps are. Because I can't help issues that we don't know about. So it's really important that we follow those steps of communication. Again, just in summary, next week in the Touch Base Tuesday, you will see the data that we get from the surveys. And then along with that data, you'll see some preliminary information that our leadership team will put around it that will lead to some recommendations that we'll be making to the board. Thank you, Mrs. Ionetti.
Does anyone else have anything they want to add? No, we're good. Okay. We will adjourn before we're going to go into the policy meeting, correct? Amy,
Yeah.
is that you? So we'll adjourn this one, short break, and then go.
Yes, it will be seamless, same meeting.
Right. Seamless. Okay.
We're going to go right into it in just a minute.
Just run into it. Okay. Then we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We can take a few minutes to regroup.
Let's plan to restart at 7:03.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
All right, we can go ahead and get started then. Good evening. I would like to call to order this evening's policy committee meeting of the Upper Dublin Board of School Directors. It is 7:03 p.m. and we are meeting virtually via Zoom. This evening, Dr. Yanni, do you have any announcements additional to previous?
No, there are no announcements this evening.
Thanks very much. And there are additionally no meeting minutes for us to review this evening. So we are going to jump right into it. And Mr. Wallach and Mr. Schroeder, please feel free to stop me. They indeed are the other members of the committee at any point if there's something I miss. First, we're going to talk about our first readings on 5 different policies. We'll go in numeric order. We'll be looking first at policy 318, attendance and tardiness. Is there anything you'd like to draw the community's attention to, Dr. Yanni?
Sure, thank you, Mrs. Franczyk. So on policy 318, this is a policy we've looked at with some recommendations from PSBA. For style purposes, as we're going through our policies, we have and will continue to add purpose statements to our policies so that it makes it very easy when we're going through the policies to very quickly understand the purpose of the policy. The bold language that has been added in the attendance and tardiness policy states that the district shall establish process to staff to report unexpected absences, which shall be addressed in accordance with board policy and an applicable individual contracts, collective bargaining agreement, or board resolution. That language where it says that we'll establish a process, we already have a process involved. We use an automatic service where staff put in their absences, and that allows us to pull substitutes as necessary. And it already, it tracks automatically attendance for us. So the delegation of responsibility, as has been our practice, we have been delegating the responsibility to superintendent or designee. And in this policy, the designee would be Ashley Kitten, our director of human resources. If you look underneath there, it talks about penalties, whether tardiness is excusable, shall be determined by the immediate supervisor. and the superintendent is authorized to direct district employees who are repeatedly tardy or, tardy not to report at all on the days when they do not report in time, or and suffer appropriate wage penalties. The good news is we don't have attendance and tardiness problems by and large in our district, but this policy really just encapsulates what the expectations are. And this policy does align with our collective bargaining agreements and individual contracts.
Great, thank you. Any members of the committee at first with any questions or comments about 318? Mr. Shirota?
Thanks. I just wanted to first acknowledge that we do not currently have a 318, but we do have a 418 and a 518, and we've been in the process of combining the 3s, 4s, and 5s into one place. The old policy language, so this is new policy language, I assume, from PSBA, Steve?
It is, correct.
The only like other PSBA policies, they don't even respect their own headings very well. So the authority, the section that's under authority is not actually an authority statement. So I would just like us to, as always, try to review those things and make sure that we have these things in the right places. I know we're just taking their language, but we don't have to take their mistakes.
Thank you, Mr. Sirota. Any other comments from the committee? Any comments from the rest of the board members? All right, great. I think, Dr. Yanni, we can make those minor tweaks to the formatting then and get the header cleaned up. And
correct. And if any members of the policy would like to email me with any of the other changes you'd like to make, we'll bring this back for a second reading next month.
Very good.
I'll do that. And yeah, I agree. It doesn't need to come back for first reading again. It's just to clean up.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, moving on now to policy 331, job-related expenses.
So we currently have a policy called expense reimbursement. This is the recommended change in title is job-related expenses. And we've added a purpose statement again for stylistic purposes. And we have an AR associated with this policy. I have nothing directly to bring the board's or the committee's attention to, but I'm happy for any feedback on the policy.
Any comments or questions from the committee? It looks pretty clean to everyone, it appears. Yeah, I didn't see anything. Mr. Routsky, go ahead.
One typo under Delegation of Responsibility, just a typo. It says superintendent or designee is or designee is twice. So if they just want to cross that one word or two out, that's all.
Yes, thank you.
Ms. Evans will take care of that.
I will take care of that.
That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, excellent. So it looks like we can move this along then. Committee, if you're comfortable for a second reading.
It will be moved to first reading for the legislative meeting. Sorry.
Right, my bad. I've got to get used to the the pathway. All right, very good. Thank you, Ms. Evans. All right, moving on to policy number 332, working periods.
Again, purpose statement, there is school code language that has been added and has been our practice when school code language is added to policies or it's been recommended by PSBA, we are putting it in our policies.
Yes, and I think some of the questions I had prior to, and my kind of first review of this, I had asked you if it sort of coincides with all of our labor agreements, and you have confirmed that that is the case. And thank you again for going back and putting those purpose statements in. Any
There's
other?
nothing, you know,
I'm
one of
sorry.
the things, there's nothing earth shattering in any of these policies. And if there would be, Ms. Kitten and I would bring that to everyone's attention if there was any type of misalignment between what was going to be in policy and what would be in a collective bargaining agreement or individual contract.
Great. Any members of the committee with comments or questions? All right, any members of the board with any comments or questions? All right, Mr. Sirota.
Yeah, I do have one. I just wanted to verify, it's old language in this policy, but just to verify, it says professional personnel shall have a duty-free lunch period of not less than 30 minutes. That's actually school code, or is that local policy?
No, that's actually school code. It's school
Right.
code for professional employees.
Right, so it's I just wanted to clarify for everyone. So it's appropriate to put that in policy. You know, that sort of language, if it wasn't in school code, wouldn't be in policy, it would be in the contract, but it's appropriate to have it here to echo school code.
Yes, good bit of information to share. Thank you. All right, seeing no additional comments or questions regarding this item, next steps for this item looks like moving it for first reading to the legislative meeting. Is that right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, see, I'll get the hang of this yet. All right, very good. Moving on to item 334, sick leave.
So sick leave, again, the purpose statement, language about having documentation for sick leave from a licensed nurse practitioner has been added as recommended, both by PSBA and also PASA, the Pennsylvania Association of School Administrators. There's also language that has been added for quarantine purposes. You'll see over the next couple of months as a result of the pandemic, there will be times that we need to add some information or some language to reflect. And, you know, moving forward, we'll start to see that outside of policy as well. There'll need to be collective bargaining agreement language and individual contract language about quarantine as well. But that language has been added here.
Great, thank you. Any comments or questions from the committee regarding policy 334? All right. Seeing none, anybody else on the board have any comments or questions? Okay, another one looking pretty solid. And this now moves on to the legislative legislative meeting as well.
Correct.
Thank you. All right. And for our last first reading this evening, 340, responsibility for student welfare.
So again, the purpose statement, but if you look, this policy, when we talk about student welfare, we added language about school-sponsored events. We did that. I looked at some of our peer districts. The policy, as it was written, did not include school-sponsored events. But after looking at our peer districts, we saw that that language was in other policies. And in consultation with Mr. Diazio, it's understood that we have responsibility for student welfare at school-sponsored events, but we felt that it was prudent to add that language actually into the policy.
Okay, thank you. And comments or questions from the committee? Dr. Levinowitz.
Not the committee, but.
Oh, that's fine.
Dr. Yanni, you crossed out except when specifically authorized by the building principal designee. That's the employees may not transport students in a personal vehicle. The background on that?
Ms. Evans, can you please scroll to that part on the screen?
It's,
Oh, yes.
There. Yeah.
So we actually have contract language that says that we are not transporting kids in private vehicles. Our insurance carriers do not want us transporting kids in private vehicles. We have a policy that's maintaining appropriate student boundaries. That has really, over the last couple of years, been a hotly debated topic, and we don't want, under really any circumstances, staff transporting kids in their private vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you. Any other committee members or board members with comments or questions? All right. Next up for this item will also then be February legislative meeting. Very good.
January.
Oh my gosh, I am really being very optimistic here.
You are.
Overly, I guess.
Well, February 2, but it'll be a second reading.
Yeah.
Right, I suppose you're right. I guess I just want this month over already. I'm not a winter person. Apologies. All right. Thank you. Those are all set. Now we're moving on to item for discussion, policy 910 community relations.
Yeah, so I asked Mrs. Francis if we could have this policy for discussion tonight. Ultimately, for those folks that are listening, these policies are not the policies of administration, they're board policies. So the board sets the policy and then administration follows the policy. Before I started to work on this policy for the board's review, in the past, we've taken policy 901, which was a singular policy, and we created an umbrella policy, meaning that the community relations policy, we then created ARs for public relations objectives, publications, and media relations. I wanted to get the committee and then ultimately the board's thoughts on really looking at all of our community relations policy and perhaps doing a comprehensive overhaul where we have an umbrella policy with a number of ARs, because some of the language in some of our policies is antiquated and really needs to be updated to match the current time that we're in.
Before I open it up, I guess my one sort of initial comment would be, as someone who is perhaps not as familiar with the policy, because I've not been on the board as long as some of the other members, I find these kinds of things that are fractured difficult to follow, and I worry that it would also be the same for the community. So I like the concept of an umbrella policy to really make it clear what we think, but also to eliminate the chance for conflict and confusion of language. But that's my sort of general question, maybe to the board as well as we think about this. Anybody else? Mark? Mr. Schroeder?
Thanks. Yeah, I agree that the umbrella policy and multiple ARs is a sensible approach. I think this particular older policy is, even by itself, already a little bit fractured. It's not really clear if it's addressing the specific topic of community groups who wish to address our students, or us finding members of the community to speak to our students, or a variety of other things. And I think all of that does need to be cleaned up. And I do think that the changes that we made recently to 901 have gone a long way towards that. I haven't at this point audited the contents of this policy against those changes to see if there's anything here that I think we failed to capture in 901. I think it's mostly in there, but that's just off the top of my head.
I agree. I agree with your comments, Mr. Sirota, because I think the worst policies are the policies that you read and you don't know what they mean at the end of reading them. Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing, what I will do is at next month's policy meeting, bring forth some revisions to a comprehensive policy. It may wind up taking us more than 2 readings until we feel like we have it in a good place. But I will work on that. And we've been sharing the draft policies with the board about a week in advance of committee meetings. What I'll do is I'll work on this with a different level of urgency and get it out to not only the committee, but the full board well in advance of the next meetings so that we can have eyes on it. And if there's anything that individual board members see that's not in alignment or that might be amiss, we can rectify it. And what I'll do, to Mr. Sirota's other point, I'll also include an audit of the other policies that we've worked on so that we can see if there's anything we're missing or anything that needs to be added to a more comprehensive policy.
Yeah, thanks. That would be great. I mean, I think there's so many different fingers in the communications that we really focused last time on outreach from the district to the community. There was a question we had about intake from the community to the administration, and but there's so much more to it that is covered here and elsewhere that I think, yeah, a big holistic look at it is
right.
Is wise.
The committee will remember in policy 901, we took out the language that said, determine which particular areas of the district or school programs, policy, or operations need clarification or explanation, because in that policy, there were a number of statements, and that statement read very different than the other statement. So look forward to an audit of the policies that we've already done and what a new and comprehensive policy around this topic will be probably within the next week and a half.
Ms.
Anybody
Francis,
else? Certainly, of course.
For some reason, I can't raise my hand tonight. I don't know why, but I'll do it this way. I just want to say I agree 100%. I mean, I concur that, developing consistency and avoiding any even potential for conflict within policies is definitely a goal. And Dr. Yanni, thanks for offering to take a look at that and bring it forward. It's a great.
Absolutely, no problem. No problem. The other thing that I will let you know in advance of the next meeting, I will update our chart of the policies that I'll be bringing forth for the committee to consider for February, March, April, May, and June. It looks very much like we will have a completely clean, updated policy book by the end of the year. And then the lion's share of the work moving forward will be to work on any policies that are Upper Dublin specific that we want to have policy language about. And then also looking at policies on a predictable, regular schedule so that we don't wind up with a policy book in a couple of years that's completely out of date again. So that will be on the next agenda for informational purposes.
Thank you.
That's great. And I must thank my predecessors, both Mr. Wallach and Ms. Rothen-Johnson for all the work that they did in getting things in this shape. I am certainly glad to be inheriting this committee at this juncture. And I would just ask all board members to keep an eye out for the information on policy 910 and the potential umbrella policy draft, just so that if you have any questions, let's get those to Dr. Yanni prior to our next meeting. All right, excellent. Thank you all. And now I'd like to open community input. If you could raise your hand virtually, we will call on you. And if you would please state your name, where you reside in the district, I would much appreciate. All right, seeing none, we will close community input. And the next policy committee meeting will take place on February 3rd, 2021. And with that, this evening's meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for attending.
Good night.
Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Stay
You
well.
as well.
Good night. So long.
Thank you.